Hello and welcome to Investment Insight. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Now let's break down what's happening in the markets today in a clear and simple way. So imagine, if you will, that the next massive leap in global energy, like the actual technology powering the future, wasn't driven by some incredibly expensive, rare metal hidden deep underground.
Right.
Imagine if it was driven by something as common as the salt sitting right there on your dining room table.
I mean, honestly, it sounds a bit like a late-night infomercial pitch.
Totally.
But this is the actual transition unfolding right now in the global energy markets. We are talking about the rise of sodium-ion battery technology.
Yeah, and I was reading through some recent industry data on this, and the shift is just staggering. Today, we're doing a deep dive specifically into the latest moves from the Chinese battery giant CATL. Specifically, their new Naxtra sodium-ion battery. And the goal here isn't just to nerd out about some new gadget. We want to figure out what this chemistry actually is and, why it is definitely not here to completely kill off lithium batteries.
Exactly.
And how it's kind of quietly redesigning the entire global energy supply chain.
Which has massive implications. I mean, we're looking at a shift that affects everything from the sticker price of the cars you drive to national security and global trade balances.
Right. And if you are a beginner investor trying to just make sense of where the electric vehicle market is heading, or even if you're just wondering how all these massive new AI data centers popping up everywhere are going to get their power.
Oh, yeah. The AI power demands are huge.
Exactly. So this deep dive is perfectly tailored for you. We're going to keep the dense college chemistry out of it. We're just focusing on what this actually means for the market.
And stripping away the media hype is probably the best place to start because, well, when most people hear about a new battery breakthrough, they expect an absolute miracle.
Yeah, I feel like every other week there's a headline about some miracle battery. You instantly picture like a luxury EV driving 1,000 miles on a single charge.
Right, the shiny new sports car.
Exactly.
Mhm.
But looking at the research for CATL's Naxtra battery, that's just not what sodium-ion is about.
Yeah.
I like to think of it this way. If a high-end lithium battery is the high-performance sports car, sodium is like the ultra-reliable, affordable, daily commuter car, right?
The commuter car is actually the perfect way to think about it. Naxtra's goal isn't peak performance. It's not trying to win a race. Its goal is providing enough performance, but doing so with a fraction of the resource risks and the costs.
Okay, so break that down for us.
Sure. Let's look at the actual physics. Lithium ions are tiny, very light little particles, and because they're so small, you can pack a massive amount of them into a very tight, lightweight space.
Right.
That high energy density is why lithium, especially when you mix it with metals like nickel and cobalt, is perfect for a luxury car that needs to go 500 miles while staying relatively light.
Okay, so lithium is compact and light. Where does sodium fit into that?
Well, sodium ions are physically larger and they're heavier than lithium ions. Since they're bulkier, you simply cannot pack as much energy into the exact same physical space.
I see.
Yeah, so if you want the exact same amount of power from a sodium battery as a lithium one, the sodium battery just has to be physically larger and heavier.
So you're definitely not putting this into a drum or like a smartphone where every single millimeter counts.
Exactly. Definitely not. But the performance gap in larger formats, like vehicles, is actually closing a lot faster than people thought.
Really?
Yeah. In February of 2026, CATL and the automaker Chang'an announced a mass production EV using these new Naxtra sodium batteries.
Okay.
And the energy density they hit was 175 watt-hours per kilogram.
Hold on. 175 watt-hours per kilogram. For anyone listening who isn't an electrical engineer, what does that actually mean when you're out on the highway?
Fair question. In practical terms, a battery with that density provides a driving range of about 400 kilometers.
So roughly 250 miles.
Right, about 250 miles. And as the supply chain matures, they see the potential to hit maybe 500 to 600 kilometers down the road. But even at 250 miles, think about the average American driver.
Right, the commute.
Exactly. For the vast majority of people who just drive to the office, drop the kids at school, get groceries, 250 miles is more than enough range.
It totally is. But I do want to push back on some of the flashy headlines I've seen lately. I've read these articles claiming this Naxtra battery represents this massive 50% improvement in energy density overnight.
Oh, right. I've seen those too.
It makes it sound like they cracked some revolutionary code. Is that actually accurate?
It's a great example of why we have to dig into the actual historical data. If you look at CATL's first generation sodium-ion battery, which they showed off back in 2021, it was already sitting at about 160 watt-hours per kilogram.
Okay, wait. So going from 160 to 175, I mean, that is definitely not a 50% jump.
Not even close.
Yeah.
It is steady, calculated progress. It's meaningful because it puts sodium right on par with the entry-level lithium iron phosphate batteries, the LFP ones.
Oh, the standard ones.
Right, the ones widely used in standard range EVs today. But no, it certainly isn't a magical 50% leap out of nowhere.
Got it. So the commuter car just got a slightly more efficient gas tank.
Exactly.
But here's the thing that really stood out to me. While passenger EVs always get the magazine covers, they get all the hype, the real money and the real revolution for sodium ion seems to be in a completely different sector. The data really points toward commercial energy storage.
Oh, absolutely. If you want to follow the big money, you really have to look away from passenger cars. The true battleground right now is in energy storage systems, what they call ESS, and backing up AI data centers.
Okay, let's get into that.
We saw a massive market signal just recently. In April 2026, CATL signed a 3-year, 60 gigawatt-hour supply contract with a company called Beijing Hyperstrong Technology.
Let's ground that number for the listeners.
Yeah.
What does a 60 gigawatt-hour contract actually look like in the real world?
Well, the average American home uses about 30 kilowatt hours of electricity a day, so 60 gigawatt hours. That is roughly enough power to run 2 million American homes for a full day.
Wow.
Yeah, this isn't some small pilot program. This contract proves that sodium ion has officially moved into massive utility-scale infrastructure.
Why, though? I mean, if I'm building a giant battery park to power 2 million homes, why not just use the lithium batteries we already know how to make? Why is sodium better for a giant warehouse full of batteries?
It all comes down to thermal management and the underlying chemistry. We talked about how sodium ions are bigger and heavier, right?
Yeah.
Well, that bulkiness actually gives them an advantage in certain environments. Sodium batteries excel in low temperatures where lithium batteries usually struggle. When lithium gets cold, it sluggishly moves power and loses capacity.
Right, everyone knows the phone dying in the snow trick.
Exactly. But even more importantly, sodium batteries are far less prone to thermal runaway.
Thermal runaway is, that's when the battery catches fire and just keeps feeding its own heat.
Yeah. Correct. High-density lithium batteries, especially the ones with cobalt in them, can overheat dangerously. To prevent that, in a massive grid storage facility, you have to install incredibly complex active liquid cooling systems.
Yeah.
You essentially have to run heavy-duty air conditioning 24/7 just to keep the lithium batteries at the perfect temperature.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that. So you're actually using the battery's own power just to cool the battery down.
Exactly. It's what engineers call a parasitic load. But sodium chemistry is just inherently much more stable. You don't need those massive, expensive cooling systems. For a huge warehouse full of batteries, eliminating that cooling requirement saves an absolute fortune on the upfront build and the daily operations.
That makes total sense. Now, I want to pivot to the U.S. market for a minute because recent analysis shows a completely different approach happening stateside compared to China, especially in the current administration. President Trump has obviously made domestic energy independence a massive priority.
Very much so.
It's all about securing our power grids and building supply chains that don't rely on overseas, adversaries.
Yeah.
So how does a Chinese breakthrough like Naxtra translate to the American strategy?
Well, the U.S. is heavily leaning into this technology, but with a very strategic infrastructure-first focus. For example, we saw a major move on June 9th, 2026. General Motors partnered with an American company, Peak Energy, specifically to develop sodium-ion batteries for the U.S. power grid.
So they aren't putting them in cars.
Not yet. The U.S. isn't aiming these early sodium batteries at passenger cars the way China is. Instead, American companies are targeting those energy storage systems we just talked about.
Gotcha.
They want to buffer renewable energy grids like storing wind and solar, and crucially, they want to provide backup power for AI data centers.
Yeah, I feel like every time I check the news, there's another story about AI data centers just devouring electricity.
Oh, the computing power required to run modern AI models is unprecedented. We are talking about single facilities that consume as much power as small cities.
Crazy.
And these data centers cannot afford to lose power for even a fraction of a second, so they require massive backup battery systems. Companies like GM and Peak Energy realize that using stable, low-maintenance sodium batteries is the perfect solution here.
Yeah.
It keeps American AI infrastructure running. And it aligns perfectly with the current administration's goals because it avoids relying on vulnerable overseas minerals.
And that actually brings us to the core economic driver of this whole transition. Because massive companies aren't pouring billions of dollars into sodium just to save money on, like, cooling fans.
No, absolutely not.
It really all comes down to a geopolitical game of monopoly over Earth's resources. Let's look at the supply chain data.
It really is the biggest vulnerability in the modern economy. Let's start by looking at China's position. China completely dominates global battery manufacturing. They build the factories, they assemble the cells, but there's a glaring weakness there.
What's that?
As of 2024, China had to import roughly 60% of their refined lithium ore. They buy it mostly from Australia and South America, so even though they control the assembly line, they are entirely at the mercy of foreign countries for the raw ingredients.
Wow. And it's not just lithium, is it? The data on cobalt is even more extreme. And cobalt is super crucial for the high-performance lithium batteries.
Oh, cobalt is the absolute poster child for supply chain vulnerability. The Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC, they control roughly 70% of the entire world's cobalt supply.
Wait, 70% in just one country?
One country, and recent market analysis shows just how fragile that makes the entire industry. When the DRC instituted export bans in 2025 and then followed up with strict production quotas in 2026, the global market completely panicked.
I can imagine.
Yeah, cobalt prices skyrocketed by 160%. It reached over $57,000 per ton.
That is insane. I'm trying to wrap my head around this dynamic. Basically, these resource-rich countries see the EV and the AI boom happening. They know everyone desperately needs their minerals, so they just squeeze the market to make a massive profit.
Yes.
There's an economic term for that, right? Resource nationalism.
That's the exact term, yes.
But looking at the fallout from this, it feels like, okay, imagine you rent an apartment and you love it,
Okay.
but your landlord sees you got a big promotion at work, so he suddenly triples your rent. You might pay it for a month or two because you're kind of trapped, but eventually you're going to say, you know what, I'll just go buy my own house. I'll build something cheaper.
The landlord got greedy. And instead of making more money long-term, he lost his tenant completely.
That is a very fitting way to look at it. The strategy of resource nationalism almost always backfires in the long run. By artificially restricting the supply and jacking up the price, the DRC didn't secure long-term wealth.
Instead, they forced their own consumers, these massive battery manufacturers, to aggressively fund alternative technologies way faster than they normally would have. I mean, if your raw materials suddenly cost 57 grand a ton, spending $1 billion on R&D to figure out how to build a battery out of table salt suddenly looks like a huge bargain.
That makes a lot of sense. And we saw this same wild volatility with lithium itself recently.
Yes, we did. In early 2026, lithium prices spiked by 86% to over $20,000 per ton. And what caused it? It wasn't a sudden physical shortage of lithium in the ground. No, it happened simply because CATL suspended operations at a single mine in China. One closure triggered a massive wave of panic buying. Automakers simply cannot build a stable business model when their core material can double in price overnight just because of a quota or a single mine closing.
Which brings up a concept from the analysis that I found absolutely fascinating, the price ceiling effect. Because sodium-ion batteries aren't actually here to destroy the lithium industry, right? They're here to act as a kind of financial bodyguard.
That's a great way to frame it. Think of sodium as a safety valve for the entire energy sector. Sodium doesn't erase the demand for lithium. It just caps how high the price of lithium can go.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second, though.
Sure.
If sodium is the heavier, less efficient commuter car, and premium EV makers need the high-performance sports car, won't the luxury automakers just pay whatever they have to for lithium? I mean, how does a cheap sodium battery actually stop the price of a premium lithium battery from skyrocketing?
It's a great question because it really gets to how substitution works across an entire global market. You're right, the premium sports car will always pay a premium for lithium. But the battery market isn't just luxury EVs, it's a massive spectrum.
Right.
It includes grid storage, cheap commuter cars, electric delivery vans, golf carts, e-bikes.
I see where you're going with this.
Right. If lithium stays cheap, great. Manufacturers will keep using it across the board because they know it. But if lithium prices start to spike again because of a supply chain issue or resource nationalism, those companies now have a viable alternative. All those grid storage projects and entry-level vehicles will just switch their orders over to sodium.
Which instantly destroys a huge chunk of the demand for lithium.
Precisely. It pulls so much demand out of the market that the lithium producers are literally forced to lower their prices to win those customers back.
Wow.
So by just existing as a cheap, scalable alternative, sodium prevents lithium from ever getting too expensive. It's a built-in price ceiling. It brings predictability to a market that has historically been super chaotic.
That is a total game changer, especially for beginner investors trying to understand the stability of this market. The floor won't fall out anymore because the ceiling is capped.
Exactly.
Now, I have to ask about something I keep seeing online. Because when regular people hear sodium, they instantly think of the ocean.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
I've seen these viral social media posts suggesting we can just, scoop up wastewater from ocean desalination plants, pump it into a factory, and instantly churn out batteries. Based on the actual data, is it really that simple, or is that just internet hype?
It is definitely internet hype.
Yeah, I figured.
Now, to be fair, every myth usually has a grain of truth. A recent report from IRENA does point out that sodium is an incredibly abundant resource. In fact, it's roughly 60,000 times more abundant in the ocean than lithium.
60,000 times. That is just a mind-boggling number.
The raw material is practically infinite. However, the idea that you can just take raw seawater or the leftover salty brine from a plant and pipe it directly into a battery factory is a total myth.
Right.
A battery is a highly sensitive, precise chemical environment. The research clearly shows that commercial sodium batteries require highly purified sodium carbonate.
Meaning you have to strip out every single impurity first.
Exactly. You have to meticulously remove all the other minerals, the biological material, all the elements found in seawater. And on top of that, these batteries require very specific electrolytes and, crucially, specialized hard carbon anodes.
Okay, pause for a second. Anodes, hard carbon. I just picture a battery as a metal cylinder with a plus and a minus on it. What actually is an anode, and why does sodium need a special hard carbon one?
Fair point. Think of a battery having two sides, right? And energy flows back and forth between them. The anode is essentially the parking garage for the ions when the battery is charged.
Okay, parking garage.
Now, remember earlier how we said sodium ions are physically larger than lithium ions?
Yeah, they're bulkier.
They're like big SUVs compared to lithium's compact cars. Well, standard lithium batteries use an anode made of graphite, and graphite has a very neat, orderly molecular structure. The parking spaces are perfectly sized for small lithium ions.
Right, so the SUVs won't fit.
Exactly. If you try to jam a big sodium ion into a graphite anode, it just doesn't fit. Hard carbon, on the other hand, has a messier, wider molecular structure. It provides the larger parking spaces that the big sodium SUVs need to safely store energy.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
But developing and manufacturing that hard carbon at scale is incredibly complex. You're definitely not just trapping seawater in a metal can.
So what does this all mean for the listener, especially if they're looking at this from an investment perspective? If I'm a beginner investor, my first instinct upon hearing sodium batteries might be to go find a company that owns a lot of salt mines or desalination plants and just buy their stock. But based on what you just said, that sounds like a terrible idea.
It would be a terrible idea. The core investment takeaway here is really crucial. Don't just look for companies with access to the raw materials. Access to salt is not a competitive advantage because salt is everywhere.
Right. There's no scarcity.
There is no scarcity to capitalize on. Instead, you need to look for the companies that have mastered the chemical processing and the complex manufacturing at scale.
It's all about the execution, not the ingredients.
Execution is everything. I mean, look at a company like CATL. They're dominant not just because they figured out a sodium battery. They are strong because they have a diverse, adaptable portfolio.
They can do it all.
They have mastered the complex chemistry across the board. They have premium lithium batteries for the luxury sports cars. And now they have sodium batteries for the cheap commuter cars and the massive AI grid storage facilities. They can literally pivot their manufacturing lines based on exactly what the market needs and what raw materials cost on any given day.
It really just comes back to the most classic investment advice out there. Diversification,
Always.
but applied to industrial chemistry. It's not about finding the one magical metal that beats everything else in every category. It's about having a customized toolkit. You wouldn't use a heavy sledgehammer to hang a delicate picture frame,
Right.
and you don't need a volatile, high-performance lithium battery to power a stationary data center that never moves.
That is the exact mindset investors need to adopt moving forward. The future of global energy just isn't going to be a monopoly of one single technology.
So, to wrap this all up, what we are seeing with sodium-ion technology like Naxtra isn't the end of lithium. If you hold lithium stocks in your portfolio, this isn't some doomsday scenario where the metal goes to zero.
Definitely not.
Instead, it is the beginning of a maturing split market. We will see lithium continue to be the premium fuel, powering our high-end, long-range needs where space and weight are really at a premium. Meanwhile, sodium is going to quietly take over the heavy lifting. It's becoming the reliable workhorse for our national power grids, backing up the massive AI data centers of the future and making entry-level electric vehicles actually affordable for the average American family.
And by doing so, it removes the immense geopolitical pressure that has really defined and restricted the battery industry for the last decade. It democratizes the very foundation of the energy transition.
Which leaves us with this final thought to ponder. For decades, global power and wealth have been dictated by the dirt beneath our feet. Who owned the oil fields, who had the rare earth metals, who controlled the cobalt mines. But if the most critical infrastructure of tomorrow, our massive national power grids and the sprawling AI brains that will soon run our economy, ends up running on technology derived from simple, infinitely abundant sodium, how will that rewrite the global map of power? It's a fascinating question.
Will the energy superpowers of the future be defined not by the rare minerals they happen to have under their dirt, but by the sheer brilliance of their chemical engineering? It's a whole new world. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button.